The Enchanted Forest, Alexander's Quest. Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom, there was a dense and enchanted forest. The forest was so thick and overgrown that it was impossible to navigate without getting lost. Many people had attempted to explore the forest, but none had returned, for the forest was home to many mysterious creatures and enchantments. One day, a young prince named Alexander decided to explore the forest. He was a brave and adventurous soul, and he was determined to uncover the secrets of the enchanted forest. Alexander rode his horse into the forest, and soon found himself surrounded by towering trees and dense foliage. As he rode deeper into the forest, Alexander began to hear strange whispers and murmurs. He looked around, but could not see anyone or anything that could be making the noises. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his leg, and he looked down to see that he had been bitten by a poisonous snake. Alexander's vision began to blur, and he realized that he was in grave danger. He clutched at his horse's mane, but soon fell off and collapsed onto the ground. The last thing he remembered was the sound of fluttering wings, before everything went dark. When Alexander awoke, he found himself in a beautiful glade in the heart of the enchanted forest. He looked around, but could not see anyone or anything that could have brought him here. Suddenly, he heard a voice, and turned to see a beautiful woman standing before him. The woman introduced herself as the Fairy Queen, and she explained that she had found Alexander unconscious in the forest and had brought him here to heal him. She told him that he had been bitten by a poisonous snake, but that she had used her magic to neutralize the venom and save his life. Alexander was amazed and grateful, and he thanked the Fairy Queen for her kindness. She smiled at him and said that she had a task for him in return. She explained that an evil sorcerer had taken over her kingdom, and that she needed someone brave and clever to help her defeat him. Alexander was hesitant at first, but the Fairy Queen promised to reward him generously if he succeeded. She gave him a map of the kingdom and warned him of the dangers that lay ahead. Alexander promised to do his best and set off on his journey. Alexander rode through the enchanted forest, following the map that the Fairy Queen had given him. He encountered many strange and dangerous creatures along the way, but he was determined to reach the sorcerer's castle and defeat him. When he finally arrived at the castle, he found it to be a dark and foreboding place. The walls were high and thick, and the gates were guarded by fierce beasts. Alexander knew that he would have to use all his cunning and skill to get past the guards and into the castle. He crept up to the gates and used his bow and arrows to take out the guards. He then snuck into the castle, avoiding the traps and pitfalls that the sorcerer had set up. Finally, he reached the sorcerer's throne room, where the sorcerer himself was waiting. The sorcerer was a fearsome sight, with eyes as red as fire and a voice that echoed through the room. He laughed when he saw Alexander, and told him that he was no match for his powers. Alexander drew his sword, and prepared to fight. The battle between Alexander and the sorcerer was fierce and intense. The sorcerer used his magic to hurl fireballs and lightning bolts at Alexander, while Alexander used his sword and shield to deflect the attacks. It seemed that the sorcerer had the upper hand, and Alexander was starting to feel the strain of the fight. But then he remembered the words of the Fairy Queen, who had told him that he had a secret weapon. Alexander reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, glittering object. It was a diamond that the Fairy Queen had given him, and she had told him that it had the power to break any enchantment. Alexander held the diamond aloft and shouted the words that the Fairy Queen had taught him. Suddenly, the room was filled with a blinding light, and the sorcerer let out a scream. When the light faded, Alexander saw that the sorcerer had been transformed into a toad. Alexander felt a rush of triumph and relief, and he knew that he had saved the Fairy Queen's kingdom. He went back to the glade where he had first met the Fairy Queen, and she greeted him with a smile. She thanked him for his bravery and skill, and rewarded him with a chest full of gold and jewels. Alexander rode out of the enchanted forest, with his head held high and his heart full of pride. He knew that he had accomplished something great, and that he would be remembered as a hero for generations to come. And he knew that he would never forget the magical land of the enchanted forest, and the amazing adventure that he had experienced there. The Curse of the Darkened Woods. Once upon a time, in a faraway land, there was a great and vast forest known as the Enchanted Forest. The forest was so called because it was said to be home to magical creatures, fairies, and elves who would come out to play and dance under the moonlight. The trees in the forest were tall and majestic, and the flowers bloomed in a myriad of colors. The Enchanted Forest was a peaceful place, and many people would come to visit it to experience the magic and beauty of the place. But one day, a dark force crept into the forest, and the magical creatures disappeared. The trees lost their leaves, and the flowers wilted. The once beautiful forest became dark and dreary, and no one dared to enter. Rumors began to spread about what had happened to the Enchanted Forest. Some people said that the magical creatures had grown tired of humans and had left the forest. Others said that a curse had been placed on the forest, causing the darkness and the disappearance of the magical creatures. But one person was determined to find out the truth. Her name was Emily, and she was a brave and adventurous young girl who lived in a nearby village. Emily had always been fascinated by the Enchanted Forest and the stories of the magical creatures that lived there. She couldn't bear to see the forest in its current state and was determined to find out what had happened. Emily packed a backpack with food, water, and a map and set off on her journey. She walked for miles, following the winding path that led to the forest. As she walked, she could feel the energy of the forest around her. The trees whispered, and the bushes rustled, but she saw no one. Emily walked deeper into the forest, determined to find out what had happened to the magical creatures. After a few hours of walking, Emily reached a clearing in the forest. In the center of the clearing, she saw a tiny fairy sitting on a leaf. The fairy was crying, and Emily could see that she was very upset. "What's wrong?" Emily asked. The fairy looked up at Emily, her eyes filled with tears. "Oh, dear human," she said. "The Enchanted Forest has been cursed by an evil witch. She has trapped all the magical creatures and caused the darkness that you see around you." Emily was shocked to hear this. She had heard stories of witches and curses, but she had never seen one for herself. She knew that she had to do something to help the magical creatures and break the curse on the forest. "How can I help?" Emily asked. The fairy told Emily that the only way to break the curse was to find a special flower that grew deep in the forest, beyond the treacherous mountains. The flower was said to have magical properties that could break any curse. Emily knew that the journey would be dangerous, but she was determined to save the forest. She thanked the fairy and set off on her quest. Emily walked for miles, climbing mountains and crossing rivers, braving the elements to reach the special flower. She had many adventures along the way, but she persevered, knowing that the fate of the Enchanted Forest was at stake. Finally, after days of travel, Emily reached the spot where the special flower was supposed to grow. She searched and searched but found nothing. She was about to give up hope when she saw a faint light in the distance. She followed the light and came to a small cave. Inside the cave, she saw a beautiful, glowing flower. Emily carefully plucked the flower, and as soon as she did, she felt a wave of energy wash over her. She knew that this was the flower that could break the curse on the forest. But as she turned to leave the cave, she saw a figure standing in the shadows. It was the evil witch who had cursed the forest. Emily could feel the power emanating from the witch, and she knew that she was in great danger. The witch cackled and said, "So you have come to save the forest, have you? Well, I won't let you leave here alive." Emily stood her ground, determined not to let the witch stop her. She took a step forward, holding the flower in her hand, and said, "I won't let you harm the enchanted forest. The magical creatures deserve to live in peace and harmony." The witch sneered and raised her wand, preparing to cast a spell on Emily. But before she could, there was a blinding flash of light, and a group of fairies appeared out of nowhere. They surrounded the witch, and one of them said, "You have caused enough harm, evil witch. Your time is up." The fairies began to chant, and the witch screamed in anger and frustration. Emily watched in amazement as the fairies cast a spell on the witch, trapping her in a magical prison. With the witch defeated, Emily took the flower and left the cave. She hurried back to the enchanted forest, eager to break the curse and save the magical creatures. When she arrived at the forest, she saw that the darkness had lifted, and the trees had regained their leaves. The flowers had bloomed, and the forest was once again alive with color and magic. As she walked deeper into the forest, she saw the fairies, elves, and other magical creatures emerging from their hiding places. They saw Emily and rushed towards her, thanking her for saving their home. Emily smiled, feeling proud of what she had accomplished. She had saved the enchanted forest and all its magical inhabitants. From that day forward, the forest was a place of peace and harmony, where humans and magical creatures could coexist in harmony. Emma and the Evil Queen. Once upon a time, in a kingdom ruled by a wicked queen, there lived a kind and brave young girl named Emma. Emma lived with her parents in a small cottage on the outskirts of the kingdom, and she spent her days tending to the animals in the nearby forest. One day, the wicked queen's soldiers came to Emma's village and began to burn down the homes and fields of the villagers. Emma's parents were taken captive, and she was left alone and afraid. Determined to save her parents and her village, Emma set out on a perilous journey to the queen's castle. She knew that the journey would be dangerous, but she was brave and determined to do whatever it took to save her family and her home. Along the way, Emma met many challenges and faced many obstacles. She had to cross treacherous rivers, climb steep mountains, and fight off fierce beasts. But she never lost her courage, and she never gave up. Finally, after many long days and nights, Emma arrived at the queen's castle. She snuck into the castle under cover of darkness and made her way to the dungeons where her parents were being held. Emma found her parents, but they were weak and sick from their captivity. She knew that she had to act fast to save them. Emma used all of her strength and wits to free her parents from their cell and escape from the castle. But the wicked queen was not going to let Emma and her parents escape so easily. She sent her soldiers after them, and a fierce battle ensued. Emma fought bravely, but she was outnumbered and outmatched. Just when all seemed lost, a group of villagers arrived to help Emma and her parents. Together, they fought off the queen's soldiers and defeated them. Emma and her parents were finally safe. The villagers thanked Emma for her bravery and named her their new leader. Emma ruled the village with kindness and compassion, and the village prospered under her leadership. And the wicked queen? Well, she was banished from the kingdom, never to be seen again. With the wicked queen banished from the kingdom, Emma's village was finally at peace. Emma was hailed as a hero, and she continued to lead her village with wisdom and kindness. But Emma knew that there were other villages in the kingdom that were still suffering under the wicked queen's rule. She couldn't rest until all of the people in the kingdom were free. Emma decided to set out on a quest to liberate the other villages from the wicked queen's tyranny. She gathered a group of brave villagers to accompany her, and they set out on their journey. Their journey was long and difficult. They encountered many obstacles along the way, including treacherous weather, dangerous beasts, and wicked soldiers. But Emma and her companions were determined to succeed, and they pressed on. Finally, after many long months, they arrived at the first village. The villagers there were overjoyed to see Emma and her companions, and they welcomed them with open arms. Emma and her companions worked tirelessly to liberate the village from the wicked queen's rule. They fought bravely against the soldiers, and they succeeded in freeing the villagers from their captivity. The villagers were grateful to Emma and her companions, and they welcomed them to stay in their village. Emma decided to stay for a few days to rest and recover before continuing on their journey. While they were staying in the village, Emma and her companions heard rumors of a magical object that could help them defeat the wicked queen once and for all. The object was said to be located deep in the heart of a dangerous forest, and many had tried to find it, but none had succeeded. Emma knew that they had to try to find this object if they had any hope of defeating the wicked queen. She gathered her companions, and they set out into the forest. The forest was dark and treacherous, and they encountered many dangers along the way. But Emma and her companions persevered, and after many days of searching, they finally found the magical object. The object was a powerful one that was said to have the power to defeat the wicked queen. Emma and her companions knew that they had to use it wisely if they were to succeed in their mission. With the magical wand in their possession, Emma and her companions set out to liberate the next village. They knew that the wicked queen's soldiers would be waiting for them, but they were determined to succeed. When they arrived at the village, they found that the soldiers were indeed waiting for them. Emma and her companions fought bravely, using the magical wand to defeat the soldiers. The villagers were overjoyed to be free from the wicked queen's rule, and they welcomed Emma and her companions as heroes. Emma knew that there were still more villages to liberate, but she felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that she had made a difference in these people's lives. Over the next few months, Emma and her companions continued on their quest to liberate the remaining villages. They encountered many challenges along the way, but they never gave up. Finally, they arrived at the last village. This village was the largest of all, and it was also the most heavily guarded. The soldiers were well trained and well armed, and Emma knew that this would be their toughest battle yet. But Emma and her companions were determined to succeed. They fought bravely against the soldiers, using all of their skills and the power of the magical wand. Finally, after a long and grueling battle, they emerged victorious. The wicked queen's soldiers were defeated, and the villagers were finally free. Emma and her companions were hailed as heroes throughout the kingdom. They had succeeded in their quest to liberate the people from the wicked queen's rule. But Emma knew that their work wasn't done yet. They had to ensure that the kingdom remained free and that the people were happy and prosperous. So Emma decided to stay in the kingdom and help to build a new society based on fairness, justice, and equality. She used her wisdom and her knowledge to help the people create a new government that would ensure that everyone had a voice and that everyone was treated with dignity and respect. Years went by, and the kingdom flourished under Emma's leadership. The people were happy and prosperous, and the kingdom was a shining example of what could be accomplished when people worked together for the greater good. And so Emma lived out the rest of her days in peace and happiness, knowing that she had made a difference in the world and that her legacy would live on for generations to come. The Adventure of James and the Maiden Isabella. Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, there was a young prince named James. James was the son of the king and queen of the kingdom, and he lived in a magnificent castle with his family. The kingdom was a beautiful place, with lush green forests, sparkling rivers, and majestic mountains. James was a kind and brave prince, loved by all who knew him. He had a passion for adventure, and would often spend his days exploring the countryside and discovering new things. One day, while out on a ride through the forest, James came across a mysterious old woman. The old woman was dressed in tattered robes and carried a staff, and she looked as though she had been wandering through the forest for years. James was curious, and he approached her to ask if she needed any help. "I do not need your help, young prince," the old woman replied. "But I can offer you a gift. A gift that will bring you great fortune and happiness." James was intrigued, and he asked the old woman what the gift was. "It is a magical amulet," the old woman said. "It will grant you the power to control the elements of nature. With this amulet, you can make the wind blow, the rain fall, and the earth tremble." James was fascinated by the old woman's offer, and he eagerly accepted the amulet. He thanked her and rode back to the castle, eager to try out his new power. James returned to the castle, eager to try out his new amulet. He couldn't wait to see what he could do with the power to control the elements of nature. As he rode through the gates of the castle, he noticed that the sky had turned dark and ominous. A storm was coming. Without a second thought, James raised his amulet and whispered a few words under his breath. Suddenly, a gust of wind picked up, blowing away the dark clouds and revealing a beautiful blue sky. James was amazed at what he had just done. He couldn't wait to see what else he could do with his amulet. So, he spent the next few days practicing his powers, controlling the wind, rain, and sun. One day, while he was practicing his powers, James heard a cry for help. He looked around and saw a group of villagers in the distance, struggling to put out a fire that had broken out in their village. Without hesitation, James raised his amulet and commanded the wind to blow. A strong gust of wind blew through the village, extinguishing the fire and saving the villagers from disaster. News of James' heroic deed quickly spread throughout the kingdom, and he became even more beloved by his people. They praised him for his courage and his powers, and he was hailed as a hero. But as time passed, James began to feel a sense of restlessness. He had conquered the elements and saved his people from danger, but he still felt that something was missing. He longed for a new adventure, a new challenge to test his abilities. One day, while James was wandering through the forest, he came across a beautiful maiden. She was sitting by the side of a river, her long hair cascading down her back, and her eyes fixed on the water. James was immediately smitten with her. He approached her and introduced himself. The maiden smiled and introduced herself as Isabella. James soon discovered that Isabella was a skilled archer and an adventurer, just like him. They quickly became friends, spending their days exploring the forest and going on exciting adventures together. As their friendship grew, James began to realize that he was falling in love with Isabella. He couldn't stop thinking about her, and he knew that she felt the same way about him. But their happiness was short-lived. One day, while they were exploring a cave, they came across a group of bandits. The bandits were fierce and dangerous, and they were intent on robbing and killing anyone who crossed their path. James knew that he had to act quickly to protect Isabella. He raised his amulet and commanded the earth to shake. The ground beneath the bandits' feet trembled, causing them to lose their balance and fall to the ground. Isabella and James quickly ran out of the cave, but they could hear the bandits pursuing them. James knew that they had to come up with a plan if they were going to escape. James and Isabella ran through the forest, with the bandits hot on their heels. James knew that he had to use his powers to keep them safe. He raised his amulet and commanded the wind to blow, creating a powerful gust that knocked the bandits off their feet. James and Isabella continued to run, but they knew that they couldn't keep this up forever. As they came to a fork in the road, James had an idea. He whispered a few words under his breath and commanded the earth to open up. A deep fissure appeared in the ground, separating James and Isabella from the pursuing bandits. The bandits were forced to turn back, and James and Isabella were able to make their escape. They returned to the safety of the castle, where they were greeted as heroes. But despite their victory, James couldn't shake the feeling that there was still something missing in his life. He loved Isabella, and he loved his people, but he couldn't help feeling that there was something more out there. One night, while he was gazing up at the stars, James saw a shooting star streak across the sky. He closed his eyes and made a wish, hoping that it would come true. The next morning, James woke up to find that Isabella was gone. He searched the castle and the surrounding countryside, but there was no sign of her. He was heartbroken and didn't know what to do. Just as he was about to give up hope, he heard a familiar voice calling his name. He turned around and saw Isabella standing before him, a smile on her face. "I'm sorry I had to leave," she said. "But I had to go on my own adventure, to find my own destiny. And now that I have, I can come back to you, James." The two of them embraced, and James knew that he had finally found what he had been looking for all along. He had found love, adventure, and a sense of purpose. And he knew that he would never stop searching for new adventures, and new ways to use his powers for good. The Garden of Hope and Renewal. Once upon a time, in a faraway land, there lived a young prince named Edward. He was kind, generous, and loved by all his people. One day, while taking a walk in the woods, he stumbled upon a beautiful garden he had never seen before. The garden was filled with vibrant flowers, fruit trees, and a sparkling fountain in the center. As he walked closer, he noticed a small cottage nearby. Curious, he approached the cottage and knocked on the door, but no one answered. The prince decided to wait and see if anyone would come out. After a while, an old woman with kind eyes and a warm smile appeared at the door. "Hello, young prince," she said. "What brings you here?" The prince was taken aback for a moment, surprised that the woman knew who he was. "How do you know who I am?" he asked. The woman chuckled softly. "Word travels quickly in these parts, Your Highness," she replied. "But please, do come in and make yourself comfortable. I have some tea brewing, and I would be honored to share a cup with you." Edward was hesitant at first, but the woman's kind demeanor put him at ease. He stepped inside the cozy cottage and took a seat at a small table by the window. The woman brought out a teapot and 2 delicate teacups, and they sat in comfortable silence for a moment as she poured the tea. After a few sips, the prince spoke up. "This garden is beautiful," he said. "Do you tend to it yourself?" The woman nodded. "Yes, I do. It has been my life's work, you might say." "I can tell," said the prince, admiring the colorful flowers and luscious fruit. "It must take a lot of hard work and dedication." The woman smiled. "It does, but it brings me great joy. And speaking of dedication, Your Highness, I have a favor to ask of you." The prince raised an eyebrow, curious. "What kind of favor?" The woman leaned in, her eyes intense. "I need you to help me save this garden." Repeated. "What do you mean?" The woman sighed deeply. "For many years, this garden has been a source of life and beauty for all who live in this land. But now, a great threat looms over it. A wicked sorcerer has placed a curse on the garden, and if we don't break it soon, all the plants and trees will wither and die." Edward's heart sank at the thought of losing such a precious place. "Is there anything I can do to help?" he asked. The woman nodded. "There is. The sorcerer's power comes from an enchanted amulet he wears around his neck. If you can retrieve that amulet and bring it to me, I may be able to break the curse." The prince was hesitant at first. He had never fought a sorcerer before, and he wasn't sure he was up to the task. But something about the woman's kind eyes and the beauty of the garden stirred something deep within him. "Very well," he said at last. I will do my best to retrieve the amulet and save the garden." The woman smiled, and her eyes glimmered with gratitude. "Thank you, Your Highness," she said. "I believe in you, and I know you can do this." With those words ringing in his ears, the prince set out on his journey to find the sorcerer and retrieve the amulet. He didn't know what dangers lay ahead, but he was determined to save the garden and restore its beauty for generations to come. The prince traveled for many days, through forests and mountains, until he came to a dark and foreboding castle. He knew that the sorcerer he sought was inside. Steeling himself, he walked through the castle gates and into the dimly lit hallways. As he made his way through the castle, he encountered many obstacles, locked doors, treacherous traps, and fierce guardians. But the prince was determined, and he used his wit and bravery to overcome each challenge. Finally, he came face to face with the sorcerer himself. The sorcerer was a tall, gaunt man with piercing eyes and a cruel smile. Well, what have we here?" he sneered. "A foolish prince come to try and stop me?" The prince stood tall, despite the sorcerer's mocking tone. "I have come to retrieve the amulet you wore around your neck," he said. "Give it to me, and I will spare you." The sorcerer laughed. "Spare me? You have no power over me, boy. I am the most powerful sorcerer in all the land." With a wave of his hand, the sorcerer summoned a burst of dark energy that sent the prince flying across the room. But the prince was not defeated yet. He stood up, gritted his teeth, and charged at the sorcerer with all his might. The two battled fiercely, spells flying back and forth between them. The prince was outmatched by the sorcerer's dark magic, but he refused to give up. Finally, with one final burst of energy, he managed to knock the amulet from the sorcerer's neck and grab it before it hit the ground. The sorcerer shrieked in rage and lunged at the prince, but it was too late. The prince had the amulet, and he knew what he had to do. He raced back to the garden, his heart pounding with excitement and fear. When he arrived, the woman was waiting for him, her eyes shining with hope. "Did you get it?" she asked breathlessly. The prince nodded, and he handed her the amulet. "I did. Now, can you break the curse?" The woman nodded, and she began to chant softly, her hands glowing with a warm light. Slowly, the curse began to lift, and the garden came back to life. Flowers bloomed, fruit ripened, and the fountain sparkled once more. The prince watched in wonder as the garden was restored to its former glory. He felt a sense of pride and accomplishment that he had never known before. "Thank you, Your Highness," said the woman, her voice choked with emotion. "You have saved not only this garden, but the hearts of all those who love it." The prince smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest. He knew that he had done something truly noble, and that he would always be remembered for it. And so, with his heart full of joy, he returned to his kingdom, eager to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Years passed, and the enchanted garden continued to thrive, becoming a symbol of hope and renewal. People from all over the kingdom made pilgrimages to the garden, seeking its beauty and the sense of peace it brought. The prince's brave deeds had become the stuff of legend, and his legacy lived on in the hearts of the people. He had taught them the true meaning of courage, compassion, and selflessness, and had shown them that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope. And so, the prince's story continued to be told, passed down through the generations as a reminder that goodness and kindness can triumph over even the greatest of challenges, and that the legacy of a noble heart can never be forgotten. 6 Pages of Mystery, A Journey to Save the Kingdom. Once upon a time, in a far-off kingdom, there lived a young prince named Alexander. Alexander was known throughout the land for his bravery, his kindness, and his quick wit. He lived a happy life in the castle with his parents, the king and queen, and his younger sister, Isabella. One day, while out on a ride through the forest, Alexander stumbled upon a small cottage. Curiosity getting the best of him, he decided to investigate. Inside the cottage, he found an old woman with a wrinkled face and long, silver hair. "Greetings, young prince," said the old woman. "What brings you to my humble abode?" Alexander explained that he was simply exploring the forest and had stumbled upon her cottage by chance. "Well, since you're here, why don't you sit down and have some tea with me?" said the old woman. Alexander agreed and sat down at the table. As they sipped their tea, the old woman began to speak of a powerful spell that could bring great wealth and prosperity to the kingdom. She explained that the spell was written in a book, but the book had been stolen and scattered across the kingdom. "I need your help, young prince," said the old woman. "Will you help me find the missing pages of the spell book?" Alexander, eager to help, agreed to the old woman's request. And so, he set out on a journey that would take him across the kingdom, through dangerous forests and treacherous mountains, in search of the missing pages of the spell book. Alexander traveled for many days, facing many challenges along the way. He encountered fierce beasts and dangerous bandits, but his bravery and quick wit helped him overcome every obstacle in his path. As he journeyed through the kingdom, he asked every traveler he met if they had seen any pages of the spell book. One day, as he was resting near a river, he heard a soft singing voice. He followed the sound until he found a group of fairies dancing in a nearby meadow. When they saw him, they stopped dancing and looked at him with suspicion. "What do you want, human?" asked the fairy queen. Alexander explained that he was searching for the missing pages of the spellbook and asked if the fairies had seen any of them. The fairy queen hesitated for a moment before answering. "Yes, we have one of the pages," she said, "but we will only give it to you if you can solve our riddle." Alexander agreed to the challenge, and the fairy queen posed her riddle. "I am always hungry, I must always be fed. The finger I touch will soon turn red. What am I?" Alexander thought for a moment before answering confidently, "Fire." The fairy queen was impressed and handed him the missing page of the spellbook. Alexander thanked her and continued on his journey, feeling closer than ever to completing his mission. As Alexander continued his quest, he came across a small village nestled in a valley. The villagers were hardworking but poor, struggling to make ends meet. Alexander noticed that they were all wearing worn-out clothes and living in rundown houses. He approached the village elder and asked if she had seen any pages of the spellbook. The elder replied that she had not, but she did have a problem that she hoped the prince could help with. "Our village is plagued by a terrible drought," said the elder. "Our crops are dying, and our animals are thirsty. We fear that soon we will have no food or water left." Alexander knew he had to help the villagers. He used his knowledge of agriculture and water conservation to help them dig a well and create a sustainable irrigation system. With his help, the villagers were able to grow bountiful crops and provide for themselves. In gratitude, the elder presented Alexander with a page of the spellbook that she had found in the forest. Alexander was thrilled and thanked the villagers for their hospitality before continuing on his journey. Alexander had been traveling for many days, and his journey had taken him through all kinds of terrain, from dense forests to towering mountains to barren deserts. He had encountered many challenges, but he had also made many new friends and allies along the way. One day, as he was crossing a vast plain, he heard the sound of hooves thundering in the distance. As he looked up, he saw a group of horsemen riding toward him, their weapons glinting in the sunlight. Alexander readied his own sword, but as the horsemen drew near, they lowered their weapons and greeted him warmly. They were a group of knights who had been sent by the king to aid Alexander in his quest. "We have heard of your journey, young prince," said the leader of the knights. "We are here to help you in any way we can." Alexander was grateful for the assistance and welcomed the knights into his company. Together, they rode across the plains, searching for the remaining pages of the spellbook. Their journey led them to a castle, perched atop a high cliff overlooking the sea. The castle was guarded by a fierce dragon, who had been terrorizing the nearby villages and hoarding treasure in its lair. Alexander and the knights knew that they had to defeat the dragon if they wanted to continue their search for the spellbook. With the help of the knights, Alexander came up with a plan to lure the dragon out of its lair and engage it in battle. After a long and grueling fight, Alexander and the knights emerged victorious, having slayed the dragon and liberated its hoard of treasure. As a token of their gratitude, the castle's lord presented Alexander with another page of the spellbook, which he had found among the dragon's treasures. With 5 pages of the spellbook in his possession, Alexander was feeling hopeful that he would soon be able to complete his mission. However, his journey was far from over, and he knew that the most challenging part of his quest still lay ahead. The next page of the spellbook was said to be located in a hidden temple deep in the jungle. The temple was guarded by powerful spirits, and many adventurers had tried and failed to reach it before. Undeterred, Alexander set out into the jungle with a small group of trusted companions. They faced many dangers on their journey, from treacherous terrain to deadly snakes and other beasts. They also had to contend with the spirits that guarded the temple, who would occasionally send powerful storms or illusions to thwart them. Despite these challenges, Alexander and his companions persisted, using their wits and skills to overcome every obstacle in their path. They navigated through the jungle, deciphered the temple's ancient puzzles, and finally reached the inner sanctum where the page of the spellbook was said to be kept. Inside the sanctum, they faced one final challenge, a guardian spirit who challenged Alexander to a duel. The spirit was fierce and powerful, but Alexander was able to hold his own, using his quick reflexes and sharp mind to outmaneuver his opponent. After a grueling fight, the spirit finally relented and handed over the page of the spellbook. Alexander and his companions emerged from the jungle triumphant, with 6 pages of the spellbook in their possession. They knew that they were one step closer to unlocking the secret of the book and saving the kingdom from ruin. With all 6 pages of the spellbook in his possession, Alexander returned to the kingdom's capital city. He was greeted with great fanfare and celebration, and many people came out to cheer him on as he made his way to the castle. Once inside the castle, Alexander met with the king and queen, who were both overjoyed to see him. They asked him to share the secrets of the spellbook with them so that they could use it to save the kingdom. Alexander opened the book and began to read the incantation, his voice ringing out clearly and powerfully in the throne room. As he spoke the final words of the spell, a blinding light filled the room, and a great wind rushed through the castle, shaking its walls. When the light faded, the castle was filled with a warm, golden glow, and everyone felt a sense of peace and harmony. The king and queen thanked Alexander for his bravery and presented him with a great reward. They also offered him a place at their side as a trusted advisor, knowing that his wisdom and courage would be invaluable to them in the years to come. The hunt for the enchanted treasure. Once upon a time, there was a group of pirates led by Captain Blackbeard. They sailed the 7 seas in search of treasure, and their ship, the Jolly Roger, was feared by all who encountered it. One day, while exploring a remote island, the pirates stumbled upon a map that led to a hidden treasure. The map was old and tattered, but Captain Blackbeard knew that it was the real deal. The crew eagerly set sail, following the map's directions to a small island in the middle of the ocean. As they approached the island, they could see a glimmering light in the distance. It was the treasure, shining in the sun. The pirates cheered and readied their swords and pistols, ready to defend their newfound riches against any who dared to claim it as their own. But little did they know, The island was guarded by a powerful sorceress who would stop at nothing to protect the treasure. The pirates would have to use all their cunning and bravery to overcome the sorceress and claim the treasure for themselves. The sorceress had sensed their presence and had summoned a fierce storm to deter them from their quest. The wind howled and the waves crashed against the ship, threatening to send the pirates to their doom. But Captain Blackbeard was not one to back down from a challenge. He rallied his crew and urged them to press on through the storm. With grit and determination, they navigated the treacherous waters and finally reached the island. As they disembarked onto the sandy shore, they were met with a wall of thorny vines that seemed to grow and shift with a life of their own. The pirates drew their swords and hacked their way through the vines, but they seemed to regenerate as quickly as they were cut. It was then that they heard the sorceress's voice, booming from the heart of the island. "You shall not pass," she warned them. "This treasure is mine to guard, and I will not let you take it from me." But the pirates were not easily deterred. They had come too far to turn back now. With a fierce battle cry, they charged towards the heart of the island, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the pirates advanced through the thorny vines, they soon found themselves in a dense jungle that seemed to stretch on forever. The trees were so thick that it was almost impossible to see the sky above, and strange noises echoed through the undergrowth. But the pirates pressed on, hacking their way through the jungle with their swords and machetes. They encountered all manner of obstacles along the way: quicksand pits, venomous snakes, and treacherous ravines. As they journeyed deeper into the jungle, they began to notice that the trees were starting to thin out. And then, finally, they saw it, the treasure. It was a glittering pile of gold and jewels, stacked high in the center of a clearing. The pirates could hardly believe their eyes. They had finally found it, the treasure they had been seeking for so long. But before they could reach it, they heard the sorceress's voice once more. "You have come too far," she said. "The treasure is mine, and I will not let you take it from me." The pirates readied their weapons, preparing to face whatever challenge the sorceress had in store for them. But to their surprise, she did not attack. Instead, she began to chant a strange incantation, her voice rising and falling in a hypnotic rhythm. The pirates felt a strange energy begin to surround them, and they knew that they were in the presence of a powerful magic. They would need all their wits and skill to overcome the sorceress and claim the treasure for themselves. The pirates knew they needed a plan to overcome the sorceress's magic. They huddled together, whispering their ideas to one another. They knew that brute force would not work against such a powerful enchantment, but perhaps they could outsmart the sorceress. After much discussion, they came up with a plan. They would create a diversion to distract the sorceress while a small group of pirates snuck around to flank her. With luck, they could catch her off guard and defeat her before she had a chance to unleash her magic. The pirates sprang into action, their swords and pistols at the ready. They charged towards the sorceress, yelling and shouting, creating as much noise as possible. The sorceress was taken aback by the sudden onslaught, and her chant faltered. Meanwhile, a small group of pirates snuck around the edge of the clearing, making their way towards the sorceress from behind. They moved quickly and quietly, their eyes fixed on the glittering pile of treasure in the center of the clearing. But just as they were about to make their move, the sorceress turned, her eyes flashing with anger. "You shall not take the treasure from me," she screamed, unleashing a bolt of lightning that crackled through the air. The pirates were caught off guard, and they scattered, trying to avoid the deadly blast. But then, to their surprise, they heard a strange sound, a sound they had never heard before. It was the sound of singing. As the pirates looked around, they saw that the sorceress was singing not a chant or a spell, but a song. Her voice was beautiful and haunting, and the pirates felt themselves falling under her spell. The pirates were surprised by the sorceress's sudden change in tactics. Her singing was unlike anything they had ever heard before, and they felt a strange power emanating from her voice. They tried to resist the enchantment, but it was too powerful. They were helpless before the sorceress's song. As the sorceress sang, she moved closer and closer to the treasure. The pirates watched in awe as she reached out and touched the glittering pile of gold and jewels. Suddenly, the treasure began to glow with a bright, unearthly light. The pirates felt a surge of energy course through their bodies, and they realized that the sorceress's singing had somehow unlocked the magic of the treasure. They knew that they had to act quickly if they wanted to claim the treasure for themselves. With all their might, the pirates tried to resist the sorceress's enchantment. They closed their eyes and focused their minds, trying to break free from the spell. Slowly but surely, they felt their wills returning to them. At the same time, the sorceress's song began to falter. Her voice grew weaker, and the pirates saw an opportunity to strike. They charged towards her, swords and pistols at the ready. The sorceress tried to resist, unleashing blasts of lightning and waves of energy. But the pirates were ready for her, dodging and weaving around her attacks. With a final blow, they knocked the sorceress to the ground, disarming her and leaving her powerless. Breathless and exhausted, the pirates stood before the treasure. They had overcome the sorceress's magic and claimed the treasure for themselves. As they gazed at the glittering pile of gold and jewels, they knew that their adventure had been worth it. They had proven themselves to be true pirates, and they would always remember the day they claimed the treasure of the sorceress. And so, the pirates set sail for home, their ship loaded with riches beyond their wildest dreams. As they looked out at the open sea, they knew that there were many more adventures to come. But for now, they would enjoy the spoils of their hard-won victory, and savor the memory of their daring quest for treasure. The Fearless Journey, a tale of triumph over fear. Once upon a time, in a kingdom far away, there lived a young girl named Lily. Lily was a kind-hearted girl, but she had one big problem: she was always afraid. She was afraid of the dark, afraid of spiders, afraid of heights, and even afraid of talking to new people. Her fear had become so big that it was hard for her to even leave her house. One day, Lily decided that she was tired of being afraid all the time. She knew that she needed to face her fears and overcome them. So she made a plan to start small and work her way up to the bigger fears. She would start by talking to a new person every day, then she would try going up the stairs to the second floor of her house, which she had never done before. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to succeed. And so, Lily began her journey to conquer her fears. Lily's first challenge was to talk to a new person. She went to the market and found a vendor selling fruits and vegetables. She mustered up all her courage and approached the vendor, who greeted her with a warm smile. They struck up a conversation, and soon enough, Lily realized that talking to new people wasn't so scary after all. Next, Lily decided to tackle her fear of heights. She went to a nearby park and saw a small hill. It wasn't very high, but for Lily, it was a good place to start. She took a deep breath, and step by step, she climbed up the hill. When she reached the top, she looked around and felt a sense of accomplishment. She had faced her fear and won. As she continued her journey to conquer her fears, Lily realized that the more she faced her fears, the stronger she became. Her fears no longer controlled her, and she felt free. However, she still had a few more fears to conquer, and she was determined to do so. Lily's next challenge was to confront her fear of spiders. She decided to start by observing them from a distance. She went to the library and read books about spiders, their habits, and their importance in the ecosystem. She learned that spiders were not as scary as she thought, and that they were actually helpful in keeping other insects in check. With this newfound knowledge, Lily decided to face her fear head-on. She went to a pet store and bought a small tarantula. At first, she was hesitant to touch it, but with some encouragement from the store owner, she slowly reached out her hand and touched its furry legs. To her surprise, it felt soft and ticklish. Lily felt a sense of pride in herself for overcoming her fear of spiders. With each fear that Lily faced, she gained confidence and courage. She no longer felt trapped by her fears and was able to live her life to the fullest. However, she knew that there was still one more fear left to conquer, and it was the biggest one of all. Lily's last and biggest fear was her fear of the dark. It was a fear that had plagued her since childhood, and she had never been able to shake it off. But now, after facing and overcoming so many other fears, Lily was determined to conquer this one too. She began by turning off all the lights in her room for a few seconds each day, gradually increasing the time as she grew more comfortable in the dark. She also started meditating to calm her mind and reduce her anxiety. Lily's progress was slow but steady, and eventually, she was able to sleep with the lights off. She even took night walks outside and enjoyed the quiet and peace that the darkness brought. Lily knew that she would always have fears, but now she had the tools to face them and overcome them. She had learned that fear was not something to be ashamed of, but something to be embraced and conquered. And with this newfound wisdom, Lily knew that she could conquer anything that life threw her way. As Lily looked back on her journey, she realized how far she had come. She had gone from being a girl who was afraid of everything to a woman who was brave and confident. She felt grateful for all the people who had helped her along the way and all the experiences that had challenged her. Lily knew that there would always be more fears to face, but she felt ready for whatever lay ahead. She felt strong and capable, and she knew that she could handle anything that came her way. Years went by, and Lily grew older, but her spirit remained strong. She had faced many challenges in her life, but she knew that there would always be more. And so, she continued to push herself, to explore new places, and to learn new things. One day, as she was walking in the park, she saw a young girl who looked lost and afraid. Lily approached her and asked if she needed help. The girl nodded, tears in her eyes. She was lost and didn't know how to get back home. Lily took the girl's hand and led her back to her home. Along the way, she talked to the girl, comforting her and reassuring her that everything would be okay. When they arrived at the girl's house, Lily hugged her and wished her well. As she walked away, Lily realized that she had faced her biggest fear yet again. She had faced the fear of not being able to help someone in need. But she had succeeded, and it filled her with a sense of joy and purpose. Lily knew that life was full of challenges, but she also knew that it was full of opportunities to be brave and to make a difference in the lives of others. She smiled to herself, knowing that there was nothing that she couldn't face. As Lily continued to live her life with courage and determination, she inspired others to do the same. People from all over the world wrote to her, thanking her for sharing her story and giving them hope. Lily was surprised by how many people her story had touched and felt grateful for the opportunity to make a difference. She decided to use her experiences to help others face their own fears. She wrote books, gave speeches, and even started a support group for people who were struggling with anxiety and phobias. She spent her days talking to people, listening to their stories, and helping them find the strength to overcome their fears. Lily realized that her journey had not only been about conquering her own fears, but also about helping others conquer theirs. She felt fulfilled and content, knowing that she had made a positive impact on the world. And so, Lily continued to live her life with courage, hope, and love. She knew that there would always be challenges and fears, but she also knew that there would always be opportunities to be brave and to make a difference. She smiled, knowing that her story was far from over. One day, Lily received a letter from someone she had never met. The letter was from a young boy who was struggling with a fear of the dark. He wrote about how scared he was at night and how he didn't know what to do. Lily was touched by the letter and knew that she had to help. She wrote back to the boy, telling him about her own fear of the dark and how she had overcome it. She gave him tips and strategies for dealing with his fear and offered to talk to him anytime he needed support. Over the next few weeks, Lily and the boy exchanged letters, and Lily watched as the boy slowly gained more confidence and courage. He wrote about how he was no longer afraid to sleep in his own bed and how he was able to turn off the lights at night without feeling scared. Lily felt proud of the boy and grateful for the opportunity to make a difference in his life. She knew that her journey had led her to this moment, where she could use her own experiences to help someone else. And she smiled, knowing that this was just the beginning of what she could do. Months passed, and Lily continued to help people overcome their fears. She traveled to different cities and countries, speaking to groups of people who were struggling with anxiety and phobias. She listened to their stories, shared her own experiences, and offered them hope and support. As she was leaving one of her speaking engagements, a woman approached her. The woman was in her 60s and looked nervous. She told Lily that she had been struggling with a fear of water for her entire life and that she had never been able to learn how to swim. The woman had always wanted to learn, but her fear had held her back. Lily listened to the woman's story and felt a strong sense of empathy. She knew what it was like to be held back by fear, and she knew that it didn't have to be that way. She offered to help the woman learn how to swim and invited her to come to the local pool with her the next day. The woman was hesitant but agreed. The next day, Lily and the woman went to the pool together. Lily started by teaching the woman how to float and how to breathe properly. As they progressed, the woman's fear began to fade, and she became more and more confident. By the end of the day, the woman was swimming laps across the pool, a huge smile on her face. She hugged Lily and thanked her for giving her the courage to face her fear. Years passed, and Lily grew old, but her spirit remained as strong as ever. She had helped countless people face their fears and live happier, more fulfilling lives. She knew that her legacy would live on through the people she had helped, and she felt proud of everything she had accomplished. As she looked back on her life, she smiled, knowing that she had faced her own fears and used her experiences to make a difference in the world. She felt fulfilled and content, knowing that she had lived a life of purpose and meaning.
Fox in Magical Forest. Once upon a time, in a faraway land, there was a magical forest where all the animals lived in harmony. One day, a little fox named Freddy decided to explore the forest beyond his usual territory. As he wandered deeper into the forest, he stumbled upon a clearing he had never seen before. As he entered the clearing, he noticed a peculiar object sitting in the middle. It was a shimmering crystal that seemed to glow in the sunlight. Freddy couldn't resist the temptation and went closer to take a look. Suddenly, the crystal started to shake, and before he knew it, Freddy was sucked into a vortex and transported to another world. He found himself in a magical kingdom that he had never seen before, surrounded by strange creatures he had never encountered. As Freddy looked around, he realized that he was on a quest to find his way back to his own world. But he knew that he couldn't do it alone. So he decided to seek the help of the creatures around him and set out on a journey to find a way back home. Freddy walked for what felt like hours, unsure of where to go or what to do. He felt lost and scared, but he refused to give up. Suddenly, he heard a rustling in the bushes nearby. He turned around, and to his surprise, he saw a group of friendly squirrels emerging from the foliage. The squirrels welcomed Freddy and offered to help him on his journey. They knew of a wise old owl who lived in a nearby tree, and they thought he might be able to help Freddy find his way back home. Together, Freddy and the squirrels set off on a new adventure. As they walked, Freddy couldn't help but feel grateful for the squirrels' kindness. He had always thought of himself as a solitary creature, but he realized that he needed the help and support of others to achieve his goals. After a long journey, they finally arrived at the old owl's tree. The owl welcomed them with a wise smile, and Freddy told him about his predicament. The owl listened carefully, then closed his eyes and meditated for a few moments. When he opened his eyes, he had a solution. The wise old owl suggested that Freddy needed to find the magical portal that would transport him back to his own world. The portal was located at the very top of a mountain, and it was guarded by a powerful dragon. Freddy knew that the journey would be difficult, but he was determined to do whatever it takes to find the portal and return home. The squirrels offered to accompany him, and together they set out on the long journey to the mountain. As they walked, they encountered many challenges, from treacherous terrain to hostile creatures. But with each obstacle they faced, they grew stronger and more determined to reach their goal. Finally, after days of walking, they reached the foot of the mountain. The dragon was nowhere to be seen, but Freddy knew that he was close. He took a deep breath, gathered his courage, and started climbing the mountain. The squirrels followed close behind, cheering him on every step of the way. As Freddy climbed higher and higher, the air grew thinner, and the wind grew stronger. But he refused to give up. With every step, he felt his strength and determination growing. He knew that he was getting closer to the portal and his way back home. Finally, Freddy reached the summit of the mountain, and there he saw the dragon, a fierce and formidable creature with eyes that glinted like diamonds. The dragon let out a deafening roar that shook the ground beneath them. Freddy knew he had to act fast. He stepped forward, trying not to show his fear, and spoke to the dragon. "Mighty dragon, I come in peace. I seek only to pass through the portal and return to my own world. Will you let me pass?" The dragon stared at him for what felt like an eternity, then nodded slowly. "You may pass, little fox," he said. "But beware, for the portal is a treacherous thing, and it may not lead you where you expect." Freddy nodded, then walked past the dragon and approached the portal. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and stepped through the shimmering barrier. As he emerged on the other side, he opened his eyes and looked around, and he saw that he was back in his own world. The forest looked the same, but everything felt different somehow. He realized that he had changed, that he had grown stronger and braver, and that he had made new friends along the way. With a sense of gratitude and wonder, Freddy turned around and saw the portal closing behind him. He knew that he would never forget his incredible journey, and that he had learned a valuable lesson, that with determination, courage, and the help of others, anything is possible. The next day, Freddy woke up feeling refreshed and ready for a new day. He stepped out of his den and saw that the sun was already high in the sky. He realized that he had slept longer than he intended, but he wasn't worried. He knew that he had all the time in the world. He decided to explore the forest and see what he could discover. As he walked, he noticed that the forest was filled with new wonders and surprises. He saw a beautiful waterfall cascading down a rocky cliff, a family of rabbits playing in a field, and a rare flower blooming on the edge of a clearing. As he continued his exploration, he heard a rustling in the bushes. He approached cautiously, ready for anything. To his surprise, he saw a small, frightened rabbit trapped in a thorn bush. The rabbit was trembling with fear and couldn't move. Freddy knew he had to help. He approached the rabbit slowly, speaking in a gentle voice to calm him down. Then, With great care, he untangled the thorns and freed the rabbit from his trap. The rabbit looked up at him with gratitude in his eyes, then scampered away into the bushes. Freddy felt a sense of satisfaction and joy that he had never felt before. He realized that helping others was one of the greatest joys in life. As he continued his exploration, Freddy encountered other animals in need. He helped a lost bird find her way back to her nest, and he showed a young mouse how to gather food for the winter. With every good deed he performed, he felt his heart grow stronger and his spirit soar. As the sun began to set, Freddy returned to his den feeling tired but happy. He knew that he had discovered a new purpose in life, and that he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. With a smile on his face, he curled up in his cozy den and fell asleep, dreaming of the adventures that awaited him tomorrow. The next day, Freddy woke up feeling excited to see what the day had in store for him. He stepped out of his den and was greeted by the warmth of the morning sun. He stretched his legs and took a deep breath of the fresh forest air. As he walked through the forest, he noticed that the trees were whispering to each other in hushed tones. He wondered what they were talking about and decided to investigate. As he approached, the trees fell silent and turned their attention to him. Freddy felt a bit nervous, but he stood tall and approached them with confidence. One of the older trees spoke up and said, "Freddy, we have been watching you for some time now, and we have seen the good that you do in this forest. Your kindness and selflessness have not gone unnoticed." Freddy was surprised by the tree's words, but he felt a sense of pride and honor knowing that his actions were appreciated. The tree continued, "We have a special task for you, Freddy. A task that will require all of your bravery and strength. Are you willing to accept it?" Freddy hesitated for a moment, but he knew in his heart that he was ready for any challenge that came his way. "Yes, I accept," he said firmly. The trees nodded in agreement and began to explain the task at hand. It was a dangerous mission that would require all of Freddy's skills and courage. But he was determined to succeed and make his forest a safer place for all its inhabitants. As the trees finished their instructions, Freddy set out on his mission, feeling determined and focused. He knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but he was ready for the challenge. With a deep breath, Freddy plunged into the unknown, eager to prove his worth and protect the forest that had become his home. Freddy traversed the forest with ease, using all his skills to overcome the challenges that lay ahead. He outsmarted a group of sly foxes, befriended a colony of busy bees, and even took on a band of mischievous squirrels. As he approached the final obstacle, he could feel his heart beating faster with anticipation. But he didn't let his nerves get the best of him. He focused on his mission and pressed forward. With one final leap, Freddy triumphantly completed his mission, and the forest was once again safe for all its inhabitants. He returned to his den, exhausted but satisfied, and fell asleep with a smile on his face. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Freddy continued to explore the forest, learning new things every day and helping those in need. He had found his purpose, and he was happy. One day, as he was wandering through the forest, he came across a group of young animals who were lost and afraid. They looked up at him with big, pleading eyes, hoping for help. Without hesitation, Freddy took them under his wing and showed them the way. He taught them how to forage for food, find shelter, and stay safe in the forest. And as he watched them grow and thrive under his guidance, he knew that he had found his true calling in life. And so, Freddy lived out the rest of his days in the forest, happy and fulfilled, surrounded by the friends and family that he had helped along the way. He knew that he had made a difference in the world, and that his legacy would live on for generations to come. Once upon a time in a magical forest, there lived a group of animals who all had different personalities and skills. There was a wise old owl who lived in a tall tree, a mischievous squirrel who loved to play pranks on his friends, a kind-hearted deer who always helped those in need, and a shy rabbit who loved to paint but was too scared to show anyone his artwork. One day, a strange mist descended upon the forest, causing all the animals to become lost and separated from each other. The owl, being the wisest of them all, realized that they needed to work together in order to find their way back home. And so, the animals set out on a grand adventure to find their way back to each other and back to their home in the magical forest. As they journeyed through the mist, they faced many challenges and obstacles. The mischievous squirrel kept playing pranks on the others, causing them to get even more lost. The kind-hearted deer helped those who were struggling, but sometimes got left behind as a result. And the shy rabbit struggled to keep up with the others, but found solace in painting the beautiful landscapes they passed along the way. But no matter what challenges they faced, the animals always remembered to work together and help each other out. And as they journeyed through the mist, they began to realize that the true magic of their home in the forest wasn't just in its beauty, but in the friendships they had formed along the way. As the animals continued on their journey through the mist, they stumbled upon a clearing in the forest. In the center of the clearing stood a grand tree, larger than any of the animals had ever seen before. Its trunk was wide enough to fit all of them around it, and its branches stretched up towards the sky like reaching fingers. As they approached the tree, they heard a soft humming sound coming from its branches. It was a tune that none of them had ever heard before, but it was soothing and peaceful, and it seemed to fill their hearts with warmth. Curious, the animals decided to investigate the source of the sound. They climbed up onto the lowest branches of the tree and followed the humming, moving deeper and deeper into its canopy. The higher they climbed, the more they felt like they were entering a new world, full of wonder and magic. Eventually, they reached the top of the tree, and there they found a small bird with the most beautiful singing voice they had ever heard. It was the bird who had been humming the tune, and as they listened to it, they felt a sense of calm and joy wash over them. The animals decided to stay in the tree for a while, listening to the bird's song and enjoying the beauty of the forest from high above. And as they rested there, they knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they had each other and the magic of the forest to guide them on their journey. As the animals rested in the grand tree, they began to notice that the mist was starting to lift. They could see glimpses of the forest below them, and the sun was beginning to shine through the branches. Excited to continue their journey, the animals thanked the bird for its beautiful song and made their way down the tree. They were eager to explore the forest again and find their way back to their home. As they wandered through the forest, they came across a sparkling river that was rushing by. They decided to follow the river and see where it would lead them. Along the way, they saw colorful fish swimming in the water, and dragonflies flitting about in the air. Eventually, the river led them to a beautiful meadow, filled with wildflowers of every color. The animals couldn't resist running and playing in the meadow, enjoying the warmth of the sun on their fur and feathers. As they played, they heard a soft whisper in the wind. It was as if the forest itself was speaking to them, telling them that they were on the right path, and that they would soon find their way back home. Feeling hopeful and rejuvenated, the animals continued on their journey through the forest, eager to see what other wonders lay ahead. They knew that no matter what challenges they faced, they had each other, the magic of the forest, and the whispers of nature to guide them. As the animals journeyed deeper into the forest, they stumbled upon a small cottage nestled among the trees. It was made of wood and moss, with a thatched roof and a welcoming glow coming from the windows. Curious, the animals approached the cottage and peered inside. There, they saw an old woman sitting by the fire, stirring a pot of soup. She looked up and smiled at the animals, beckoning them to come inside. Feeling welcomed, the animals entered the cottage and gathered around the fire. The old woman introduced herself as a wise forest spirit who had lived in the forest for centuries. She listened to the animals' stories and adventures, and offered them advice and guidance for their journey ahead. She also shared stories of the forest's history, and the magic and wonder that had existed in the forest long before the animals were born. The animals listened intently, feeling a deep respect and admiration for the forest and all of its secrets. As the night grew late, the old woman bid the animals farewell and gave them each a small token to guide them on their journey. The owl received a feather for wisdom, the squirrel a nut for mischief, the deer a leaf for kindness, and the rabbit a paintbrush for creativity. Feeling grateful for the old woman's wisdom and guidance, the animals continued on their journey, carrying their tokens with them. They knew that they had much to learn from the forest and its inhabitants, and that with each passing day, they would grow stronger and wiser. As the animals journeyed deeper into the forest, they came across a clearing filled with tall, swaying grass. The grass was so tall that they could barely see over it, but they could hear the sounds of something moving around inside. Curious, they approached the grass and carefully made their way inside. As they pushed their way through the grass, they saw that it was filled with all sorts of creatures they had never seen before. There were insects with iridescent wings, tiny frogs that hopped from blade to blade, and even a family of hedgehogs curled up in a cozy little nest. As the animals explored the clearing, they noticed that the grass seemed to be getting taller and thicker the farther they went. It was almost as if the grass was alive, and growing in response to their presence. Suddenly, they heard a loud rustling sound coming from the center of the clearing. They cautiously made their way towards the source of the sound, and found themselves face to face with a giant creature, towering over them like a tree. The creature was covered in shaggy fur and had two large, glowing eyes that shone like stars. It looked down at the animals with a curious expression, and let out a deep, rumbling growl. Feeling intimidated but not wanting to show fear, the animals introduced themselves to the creature and explained that they were on a journey through the forest. To their surprise, the creature responded in a gentle voice, and offered to guide them through the rest of the clearing. Feeling grateful for the creature's kindness, the animals followed it through the tall grass, marveling at the beauty of the forest around them. They knew that with each new encounter, they were learning more about themselves and the world around them, and they felt more and more ready to face whatever lay ahead. The creature led the animals through the rest of the clearing, showing them all sorts of hidden wonders that they would have never found on their own. They saw a sparkling stream that wound its way through the grass, a bed of fragrant wildflowers, and even a hidden cave filled with glowing crystals. As they explored the clearing, the animals began to realize that the forest was far more vast and mysterious than they had ever imagined. There were so many secrets hidden within its depths, and they knew that they had only scratched the surface. Eventually, the creature led them to the edge of the clearing, where they could see the forest stretching out before them in all directions. It turned to the animals and bid them farewell, giving each of them a small trinket to remember their encounter. The animals watched as the creature disappeared back into the forest, and then turned to continue their journey. They knew that they had been changed by their encounter, and that they would never forget the lessons they had learned in the clearing. As they walked deeper into the forest, they felt a sense of anticipation growing within them. They knew that there were more adventures to be had, more mysteries to uncover, and more magic to experience. And they were ready for whatever lay ahead. As the animals journeyed through the forest, they encountered many more challenges and wonders. They faced fearsome predators, navigated treacherous terrain, and even discovered hidden treasures that had been lost for centuries. Through it all, they remained steadfast and courageous, always leaning on each other for support and guidance. They grew stronger, wiser, and more compassionate with each passing day, and their bond grew stronger with every challenge they faced together. Finally, after many long weeks of wandering through the forest, the animals emerged into a bright, open meadow. In the distance, they could see a small village, with smoke rising from chimneys and the sounds of laughter and music drifting towards them on the breeze. With renewed energy and excitement, the animals bounded towards the village, eager to see what adventures awaited them there. They knew that their journey was far from over, but they also knew that they were ready for whatever lay ahead. As they entered the village, they were greeted with warmth and kindness by the local villagers. They shared stories of their journey through the forest, and listened with fascination as the villagers regaled them with tales of their own. In the end, the animals realized that their journey had been more than just a physical one. It had been a journey of self-discovery, of growth, and of finding their place in the world. And as they looked out over the village, they knew that they had found that place, and that they would always be grateful for the lessons they had learned along the way. Isabella and the Curse of the Dragon's Lair. Once upon a time, in a far-off kingdom, there lived a young princess named Isabella. She was known throughout the land for her beauty, intelligence, and kind heart. Despite her privileged upbringing, Isabella was always eager to learn more about the world and the people who lived in it. One day, while wandering through the forest on the outskirts of her kingdom, Isabella stumbled upon a small cottage nestled among the trees. As she approached the door, she heard the sound of someone weeping inside. Concerned, she knocked on the door and was greeted by an old woman with kind eyes and a wrinkled face. "What's wrong?" asked Isabella. "It's my granddaughter," replied the woman, wiping away her tears. "She's been cursed by a wicked sorcerer and turned into a frog. I don't know how to break the spell." Isabella's heart went out to the old woman and her granddaughter. She vowed to do whatever she could to help them. And so, she set out on a journey to find the sorcerer and put an end to his evil deeds. Isabella traveled far and wide, asking everyone she met if they had seen the wicked sorcerer. Many had heard of him, but none knew where he could be found. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months, but Isabella refused to give up. She knew that the old woman and her granddaughter were counting on her. Finally, one day, while wandering through a dense forest, Isabella stumbled upon a clearing. In the center of the clearing stood a tall tower, and at the very top, she could see a faint light flickering in the window. Isabella knew that this must be the sorcerer's lair. The sorcerer laughed when he saw Isabella approach him with her sword. "You think you can defeat me, little princess?" he sneered. "I am the most powerful sorcerer in the land, and you are nothing but a mere mortal." But Isabella didn't let his words deter her. She lunged at him with her sword, and the sorcerer retaliated with a bolt of lightning. Isabella dodged the blast and swung her sword again, but the sorcerer blocked it with a shield of dark magic. The battle raged on for hours, with neither side gaining the upper hand. But Isabella refused to give up. She fought with all her strength, her determination fueled by her desire to save the old woman's granddaughter from the curse. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Isabella saw her chance. The sorcerer's shield faltered for just a moment, and Isabella seized the opportunity. She plunged her sword deep into the sorcerer's heart. The sorcerer let out a howl of pain and crumpled to the ground. Isabella stood over him, victorious but exhausted. She had done it. She had defeated the wicked sorcerer and broken the curse. "I did it!" Isabella exclaimed. "I defeated the sorcerer and broke the curse." The frog nodded, and Isabella scooped her up gently. She carried the frog back to the cottage and placed her in the old woman's lap. The old woman wept tears of joy as her granddaughter transformed back into a human. Isabella smiled, her heart filled with warmth and happiness. She had saved the day, and all was right in the kingdom once more. The old woman thanked Isabella from the bottom of her heart for all that she had done. She promised to spread the word of Isabella's bravery and kindness throughout the land, and to make sure that everyone knew of the princess who had saved her granddaughter from the curse. Isabella, in turn, thanked the old woman for her guidance and wisdom. She had learned so much during her journey, and she knew that she wouldn't have been able to defeat the sorcerer without the old woman's help. As they talked, Isabella noticed that the sun was setting outside. She realized that it was time for her to return to her own kingdom. She bid farewell to the old woman and her granddaughter, promising to visit them again soon. As she walked back to her horse, Isabella felt a sense of contentment and accomplishment. She had gone on an adventure, faced danger, and saved a life. But more importantly, she had learned about the power of love, friendship, and determination. Isabella mounted her horse and rode off into the sunset, ready for whatever new adventure lay ahead. As Isabella rode through the countryside, she couldn't help but reflect on all that had happened during her journey. She thought about the people she had met, the challenges she had faced, and the lessons she had learned. But even as she felt a sense of pride and accomplishment, she also felt a twinge of sadness. She knew that her adventure was over, and that she would soon return to her life as a princess. She wondered if she would ever have another chance to go on a quest, to see new sights and meet new people. Just then, Isabella noticed a signpost pointing in two directions. One sign read, Castle of the Dragon, while the other read, Lost City of Gold. Isabella's heart skipped a beat. She had heard of both places before, but she had never had the chance to visit them. She hesitated for a moment, wondering if she should continue on her journey or return home. But then she realized that this was her chance. She could continue her adventure, explore new lands, and make new memories. Without a second thought, Isabella spurred her horse forward, galloping towards the unknown. As Isabella rode towards the castle of the dragon, she felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She had heard tales of the fearsome dragon that guarded the castle and wondered if she would be able to defeat it. But as she got closer, she saw that the castle was not what she expected. Instead of a dark and foreboding fortress, it was a bright and cheerful place, with flowers blooming in the courtyard and birds singing in the trees. Isabella dismounted from her horse and approached the castle gates. A guard greeted her warmly and asked if she was there to see the dragon. Yes, Isabella replied. I have come to face the dragon and prove my worth. The guard nodded and led her through the castle to the dragon's lair. Isabella was surprised to find that the dragon was not at all what she expected. Instead of a fierce and terrifying beast, it was a gentle creature, with kind eyes and a friendly disposition. The dragon welcomed Isabella warmly and thanked her for coming. It explained that it had been cursed by an evil sorcerer and had been forced to guard the castle until someone brave enough to break the curse arrived. Isabella listened to the dragon's story and knew that she had to help. She asked the dragon what she could do to break the curse and set it free. The dragon told her that there was a magical amulet hidden in the nearby forest, and that whoever found it would be able to break the curse. Isabella thanked the dragon and set off towards the forest, determined to find the amulet and free the gentle beast. Isabella walked through the forest, searching for the magical amulet. She looked under rocks, behind trees, and in bushes, but couldn't seem to find it. Just as she was about to give up, she heard a faint humming sound. She followed the sound deeper into the forest until she came across a small clearing. In the center of the clearing was a beautiful fairy, singing and dancing around a small pond. The fairy noticed Isabella and flew over to her. "Hello, "Princess," she said. "What brings you to this part of the forest?" Isabella explained her quest to the fairy and asked if she had seen the amulet. The fairy nodded and pointed to a nearby tree. "The amulet is hidden in a hollow in that tree," she said. "But be warned, Princess. The tree is guarded by a powerful enchantress. She will not give up the amulet easily." Isabella thanked the fairy and made her way to the tree. She found the hollow and reached inside, feeling around for the amulet. But as she did, she felt a sudden jolt of electricity, and a voice hissed in her ear, "Who dares to disturb my tree?" Isabella turned around to see a beautiful woman with long black hair and piercing green eyes. She knew immediately that this was the enchantress the fairy had warned her about. The enchantress demanded to know why Isabella was there and what she wanted with the amulet. Isabella explained her quest to break the curse of the dragon and set it free. The enchantress laughed. "Do you really think you can defeat me and take the amulet?" she sneered. "I am the most powerful sorceress in the land. You are no match for me." Isabella didn't back down. She knew that she had to try, no matter how powerful the enchantress was. She drew her sword and prepared to fight. Isabella and the enchantress clashed swords, their weapons ringing out in the silence of the forest. Isabella was skilled, but the enchantress was more powerful than she had anticipated. Just as Isabella thought she would be defeated, she remembered the lessons her father had taught her about perseverance and never giving up. With renewed determination, she pushed forward, her sword meeting the enchantress's with a force that surprised even herself. The battle was long and grueling, but in the end, Isabella emerged victorious. She claimed the magical amulet and set off back to the castle of the dragon, her heart filled with hope. When she arrived, the dragon greeted her warmly and she showed it the amulet. The dragon took the amulet and held it up to the light. Suddenly, a bright burst of magic filled the room, and the curse was broken. The dragon transformed into a beautiful prince, and Isabella was struck by his handsome features. They gazed into each other's eyes, and Isabella felt a spark of something she had never felt before. "Thank you, Princess," the prince said. "You have saved me from a terrible fate. How can I ever repay you?" Isabella smiled. "You can start by taking me on a ride on your back," she said, giggling. The prince transformed back into a dragon and offered his back to Isabella. She climbed on, and they flew out of the castle and into the sky. Isabella laughed and screamed with joy as they soared over the land, free at last from the curse of the evil sorcerer. And as they flew off into the distance, Isabella knew that she had made a new friend and discovered a whole new world of adventure waiting for her. Jack's quest for the fairy princess. Once upon a time in a far-off land, there lived a young boy named Jack. Jack was an adventurous and curious boy who loved exploring the woods near his home. One day, while exploring, he stumbled upon a mysterious cave. Being the curious boy he was, he couldn't resist the urge to explore the cave. As he ventured deeper into the cave, he noticed something glittering in the distance. As he got closer, he realized that it was a magnificent treasure chest. Jack couldn't believe his luck and quickly approached the chest, but just as he was about to touch it, he heard a loud rumbling noise. Startled, Jack turned around and saw that the cave's entrance was blocked by a massive boulder. He was trapped, and there was no way out. Jack sat down beside the treasure chest, feeling defeated and hopeless. Little did he know that his adventure had only just begun. Jack sat in the cave, feeling dejected and lost. He wondered how he could ever get out of this situation. As he sat there, he noticed something strange about the treasure chest. It seemed to be emitting a soft, golden glow. Jack felt drawn to it and slowly reached out to touch it. Suddenly, the chest shook, and the rumbling noise grew louder. Jack stumbled back, afraid of what was happening. But then, the lid of the chest slowly creaked open, revealing a beautiful golden key inside. Jack couldn't believe his eyes. He reached out and took the key, wondering what it could unlock. He looked around the cave, trying to find a keyhole, but he couldn't see anything. So, he decided to keep the key with him and continued to explore the cave, hoping to find another way out. As he walked deeper into the cave, he saw something glowing in the distance. He moved closer and realized that it was a magical portal, shimmering with different colors. Jack felt a sudden urge to step into the portal, but he wasn't sure if it was safe. Jack stood there, staring at the portal, wondering where it led. He had heard stories of magical portals that could transport you to different worlds, but he had never seen one before. As he pondered, he heard a voice whispering his name. Jack. Jack. He looked around but saw no one. The voice continued, Jack, if you want to find your way out, you must enter the portal. Trust your instincts, and they will guide you. Jack hesitated for a moment, but then he remembered the golden key in his pocket. Perhaps it was the key to unlocking the mystery of the portal. He took a deep breath and stepped forward, holding the key tightly in his hand. As he entered the portal, he felt a rush of energy coursing through his body. The colors swirled around him, and he felt as if he were being lifted off his feet. He closed his eyes, trying to hold on, and then everything went black. When Jack opened his eyes, he found himself in a strange new world. The sky was a brilliant shade of purple, and the trees had leaves of silver and gold. He had never seen anything like it before. As he looked around, he realized that he was not alone. A group of tiny creatures, no bigger than his hand, were staring up at him in wonder. Jack was amazed by the sight of the tiny creatures. They had delicate wings that fluttered like butterflies, and their faces were full of wonder and curiosity. They seemed friendly and didn't seem to be afraid of him. As Jack approached the creatures, they began to speak to him in a language he had never heard before. At first, he couldn't understand them, but soon he realized that he could understand their language perfectly. "Welcome, Jack, to the land of the fairies," one of the creatures said. "We have been waiting for you." "Waiting for me?" Jack asked, surprised. "Why?" "You have been chosen, Jack," another creature said. "Chosen to help us find the lost fairy princess. She has been missing for many years, and we have been searching for her tirelessly." Jack didn't know what to say. He had never thought of himself as a hero or a rescuer. But he felt a strange sense of purpose wash over him. "I'll help you find the fairy princess," Jack said, determined. "But how do we start?" The fairies huddled together and whispered for a few moments. Then, the first fairy stepped forward and said, "The fairy princess was last seen in the land of shadows, a dark and dangerous place filled with evil creatures. We cannot enter that land, for it is forbidden for us. But you, Jack, with your human strength and courage, can venture into the land of shadows and find her." Jack was hesitant. He had heard stories of the land of shadows, and they were not good. It was said that no one who entered that land ever returned. But the fairies looked at him with such trust and hope in their eyes that he couldn't say no. He knew he had to help them. "All right," he said, taking a deep breath. "I'll go to the land of shadows and find the fairy princess. But I'll need your help to guide me." The fairies smiled and nodded, and one of them came forward with a small vial filled with glowing liquid. "This is a potion that will protect you from the evil creatures in the land of shadows," the fairy said. "Drink it, and you will be safe." Jack took the vial and drank the potion. It tasted sweet and tangy, and he felt a warm sensation spreading through his body. He felt ready to face any challenge. "Thank you," he said to the fairies. The fairies huddled together once again, whispering amongst themselves. After a few moments, one of them stepped forward and said, "Follow the path through the woods, and you will come to the edge of the land of shadows. But be careful, Jack. The creatures there are not like anything you have ever seen before. They will stop at nothing to keep you from finding the fairy princess." Jack nodded, feeling a knot form in his stomach. He knew that he was about to face the greatest challenge of his life. But he also knew that he couldn't let the fairies down. He had promised to find the fairy princess, and he intended to keep that promise. With a deep breath, he set out on the path through the woods. The fairies had given him a map, but the woods were dense, and the path was winding. He had to pay close attention to the map and the markings on the trees to stay on track. As he walked, he heard strange sounds coming from the woods. It sounded like growling and snarling, but he couldn't see anything. He gripped the hilt of his sword, ready to defend himself if necessary. After what felt like hours of walking, he finally emerged from the woods and saw the land of shadows looming in front of him. The sky was dark, and the air was thick with a foul smell. He could see the shapes of twisted trees and jagged rocks in the distance, and he knew that he had to enter that land to find the fairy princess. Jack stepped forward, determined to complete his mission. As he approached the edge of the land of shadows, he could see movement in the shadows. The creatures were getting closer. He unsheathed his sword and held it tightly, ready for whatever came his way. He took another step forward, and a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a gnarled and twisted creature, with sharp teeth and glowing eyes. "You shall not pass," the creature hissed, lunging forward. Jack swung his sword, but the creature was too quick. It dodged his blow and came at him again. Jack fought with all his might, but he was no match for the creature's strength and agility. He was about to be overpowered when suddenly, a bright light filled the air. The creature recoiled, shielding its eyes from the light, and Jack saw that it was the fairies who had come to his rescue. "Go, Jack," one of them shouted. "Find the fairy princess. We'll hold them off." Jack didn't hesitate. He ran forward, deeper into the land of shadows. The creatures were all around him now, but he kept going, following the map and his instincts. He had to find the fairy princess before it was too late. As Jack pressed on, he felt his determination growing. He could hear the fairies battling the creatures behind him, and he knew that he had to succeed for their sake as well as his own. At last, he saw a faint light in the distance, and he knew that he had found the fairy princess. He raced towards the light, his heart pounding with excitement and anticipation. When he reached the source of the light, he saw the most beautiful fairy he had ever seen. She had sparkling green eyes and delicate wings that shimmered in the light. She smiled at him, and Jack felt a warmth spread through him that he had never felt before. "Thank you for coming, Jack," she said. "I knew that you would find me." Jack took her hand, and they flew out of the land of shadows together. As they soared through the sky, he realized that he had found something far more precious than he had ever imagined. He had found love, and he knew that he would always cherish it. From that day on, Jack and the fairy princess were inseparable. They went on many adventures together, and Jack knew that he would always be there to protect her, no matter what challenges they might face. Together, they lived happily ever after. Trail of Kindness, The Journey of Daisy. Once upon a time, in a far-off land, there was a magical forest where animals of all kinds lived in harmony. The forest was known for its beauty and tranquility, and many travelers came from far and wide to admire its lush greenery and vibrant flowers. One day, a young deer named Daisy was frolicking in a meadow when she stumbled upon a mysterious object. It was a golden locket, with intricate designs etched into its surface. Daisy was curious and picked it up, wondering who it belonged to. As she held the locket, she felt a strange warmth spread through her body. Determined to find the owner of the locket, Daisy set out on a quest. She asked every animal she met if they had lost the locket, but nobody claimed it. As she journeyed deeper into the forest, she began to realize that the locket might hold a greater meaning than she had first thought. What could it be? Daisy wondered. As she continued her journey, Daisy encountered a wise old owl perched on a branch of a tall tree. The owl noticed the golden locket hanging around Daisy's neck and asked her about it. Daisy explained her quest to find the locket's owner, and the owl listened intently. The owl stroked his long white beard and said, "My dear, that locket is no ordinary trinket. It possesses great magic and is said to bring good luck to whoever possesses it. The one who lost it may be in great need of its power." Daisy's eyes widened in amazement. She had no idea that the locket was so special. With newfound determination, she continued her journey, eager to unravel the mystery behind the golden locket and its magic. As she ventured deeper into the forest, Daisy met a group of mischievous squirrels who were busy gathering nuts. They noticed the golden locket hanging around Daisy's neck and were intrigued. One of the squirrels, named Nutmeg, scampered over to Daisy and said, "What's that shiny thing around your neck? It looks important." Daisy smiled and explained her quest to find the locket's owner. The squirrels listened intently and then offered to help Daisy in her search. Together, they scurried through the forest, searching high and low for any clues. As Daisy and her new friends journeyed deeper into the forest, they came across a small cottage nestled among the trees. Smoke was coming out of the chimney, and the sweet smell of freshly baked bread filled the air. Curious, Daisy and her companions approached the cottage, where they found an old woman sitting on the porch, knitting a scarf. The woman looked up and smiled warmly at them. "Greetings, young ones," she said. "What brings you to my humble abode?" Daisy explained her quest to find the owner of the golden locket, and the old woman listened intently. After a moment of contemplation, she spoke. As Daisy and her friends traveled towards the kingdom, they encountered a dark and treacherous path. The trees were dense, and the air was thick with an eerie fog. Daisy felt a shiver run down her spine as she remembered the stories she had heard about this part of the forest. But she knew that she had to press on. With the help of her friends, Daisy navigated through the darkness, relying on her instincts to guide her towards the kingdom. Suddenly, they heard a faint cry in the distance. Daisy and her companions followed the sound until they came across a young girl, sitting by a tree, crying. The girl was none other than the princess who had lost the golden locket. Daisy and her friends sat down to strategize their plan to retrieve the golden locket from the bandits. The squirrels suggested that they could climb the trees and observe the bandits' movements from above. The birds offered to create a diversion by swooping down and making loud noises, distracting the bandits. Daisy was impressed by her friends' ideas and decided to put them into action. With the squirrels and birds leading the way, Daisy and the princess followed close behind, approaching the bandits' campsite. As they got closer, the squirrels climbed up the trees and began observing the bandits' movements. The birds swooped down and created a loud commotion, distracting the bandits and drawing their attention away from Daisy and the princess. Taking advantage of the distraction, Daisy and the princess sneaked into the campsite, searching for the golden locket. After a few tense moments, they finally found it, tucked away in a small chest at the back of the campsite. But before they could make their escape, one of the bandits spotted them and sounded the alarm. Daisy and the princess had to act fast. They grabbed the locket and ran towards the trees, where their friends were waiting to help them make their escape. As they ran, Daisy couldn't help but feel grateful for the friends she had made along her journey. Without their help, she would never have been able to retrieve the locket and reunite it with its rightful owner. Daisy and her friends ran through the forest as fast as they could, the bandits hot on their heels. But with the help of the squirrels and birds, they were able to evade their pursuers and make their way back to the kingdom. Upon their arrival, the princess was overjoyed to be reunited with her golden locket. She thanked Daisy and her friends for their bravery and kindness, and promised to reward them handsomely. But Daisy knew that the real reward was the friendships she had made along the way. She and her new friends spent the day celebrating their victory and enjoying the festivities in the kingdom. As the day drew to a close, Daisy knew that it was time for her to continue her journey. There were still many adventures to be had, and many new friends to be made. With a heavy heart, she said goodbye to her friends and set out once again into the great unknown. As Daisy traveled on, she encountered new challenges and obstacles. But she faced them with the same determination and courage that had brought her this far. Along the way, she met many new friends from different walks of life. She met a wise old owl who shared his wisdom and knowledge with her, a mischievous fox who taught her how to be quick and nimble, and a kind-hearted bear who showed her the importance of compassion and empathy. With each new friend she made, Daisy's journey became richer and more rewarding. She learned new things about herself and the world around her, and grew stronger and wiser with every step. But even as she continued on her journey, Daisy knew that there would always be more challenges to face and more adventures to be had. And she looked forward to them with excitement and anticipation, knowing that she had the courage and resilience to overcome whatever lay ahead. One day, as Daisy was walking through a dense forest, she heard a faint cry for help. She followed the sound and found a young deer trapped in a hunter's snare. The poor creature was struggling to free itself but was unable to do so. Without hesitation, Daisy rushed to the deer's aid. She carefully loosened the snare and helped the deer to free itself. The deer looked up at Daisy with gratitude in its eyes, and then bounded away into the forest. Daisy felt a warm sense of satisfaction knowing that she had helped another creature in need. She continued on her journey, feeling renewed and invigorated by the experience. As she walked, she began to realize that there was a deeper purpose to her journey. It wasn't just about finding adventure and making friends, it was about making a difference in the world and helping those who needed it most. With this newfound sense of purpose, Daisy resolved to continue her journey with even greater determination and compassion. She knew that no matter where the road took her, she would always be ready to lend a helping hand and make the world a better place. As Daisy journeyed on, her reputation as a kind and selfless traveler began to spread far and wide. People from all over the land would seek her out for guidance, comfort, and support. She helped farmers tend to their crops, healed sick animals, and even helped a group of villagers rebuild their homes after a terrible storm. Everywhere she went, Daisy left a trail of kindness and compassion in her wake. Word of her good deeds even reached the ears of the king, who invited her to the palace to thank her for her selflessness and offer her a place in his court. But Daisy politely declined, knowing that her true calling lay in helping others out in the world. So she continued on her journey, traveling from village to village, always ready to lend a hand to those in need. And as she went, she inspired others to do the same, to spread kindness and compassion wherever they went. Daisy knew that she may never reach the end of her journey, but that was okay. For as long as there were people in need, and as long as she had the strength and determination to help them, she would continue to walk the road of kindness, one step at a time. And so, Daisy's journey continued for many years, each day bringing new challenges and new opportunities to make a difference in the world. As she grew older, Daisy never lost her compassion or her desire to help others. She became a wise elder, respected and loved by all who knew her. Her legacy lived on through the countless lives she had touched and the many hearts she had opened. Eventually, the day came when Daisy knew it was time to rest. She found a quiet spot in the forest, where she could sit and reflect on all she had seen and done. As she closed her eyes, she felt a sense of peace and contentment, knowing that she had lived a life full of purpose and meaning. In the years that followed, many travelers passed through the forest, and some even claimed to have seen a vision of Daisy, sitting serenely among the trees, her kind spirit still watching over the world she had helped to shape. And so, Daisy's journey may have ended, but her legacy lived on, inspiring others to follow in her footsteps and make the world a better, kinder place for all. The Crystal Quest, a tale of bravery and treasure. Once upon a time, in a far-off kingdom, there was a young girl named Lily. She lived in a small cottage with her mother and father. Lily was a curious and adventurous girl, always seeking out new experiences and exploring the world around her. One day, as she was wandering in the forest, she stumbled upon a clearing she had never seen before. In the center of the clearing stood a tall, ancient tree with gnarled roots and branches that seemed to stretch up to the sky. As Lily approached the tree, she noticed that there was something hanging from one of its branches, a small, shimmering object that glinted in the sunlight. Intrigued, Lily reached up to take a closer look. But as she grasped the object, a sudden gust of wind shook the branches of the tree, causing the object to slip from her grasp and fall to the ground. As she looked down, she saw that it was a small key, unlike any she had ever seen before. Lily couldn't shake the feeling that this key was important in some way, and she decided to take it home with her to investigate further. As she walked back to her cottage, she couldn't help but wonder what the key might unlock. Perhaps it was the key to a treasure chest or a hidden door in the forest. The possibilities seemed endless. She couldn't wait to show the key to her parents and get their thoughts on what it might open. But little did she know that her discovery would lead her on an incredible adventure beyond her wildest dreams. Lily's parents were just as curious as she was about the mysterious key. Her father examined it closely, turning it over in his hand and running his fingers along its intricate carvings. Her mother suggested that they ask the village elder, who was known for her wisdom and knowledge of the ancient forest. Excited by the prospect of solving the mystery of the key, Lily and her parents set out to find the village elder. They traveled for many hours through the dense forest, following the winding path that led to the elder's home. When they arrived, the elder welcomed them warmly and listened intently as they explained their discovery. After examining the key, the elder told them a story of an ancient castle, long lost to time and hidden deep within the forest. According to legend, the castle was home to a powerful sorcerer who had been banished by the villagers many years ago. It was said that the sorcerer had left behind a great treasure, but that it could only be found by someone who possessed the key that Lily had found. The story sent shivers down Lily's spine. Could it be true? Was the key really the key to a treasure hidden deep within the forest? The elder advised them to be careful, for the forest was full of dangers and they would need to be clever and brave to succeed on their quest. With her heart beating fast with excitement and anticipation, Lily knew that she was ready for the challenge. Lily and her family set out early the next morning, following the elder's directions to the ancient castle. As they walked deeper into the forest, they encountered many obstacles along the way. They had to cross a raging river, climb steep cliffs, and navigate through treacherous swamps. Despite these challenges, Lily and her family pressed on, driven by their curiosity and desire to uncover the secrets of the castle. Along the way, they met many strange and wonderful creatures, including talking animals and magical beings, who offered them guidance and assistance on their journey. As they approached the castle, they could feel the magic in the air. The castle was surrounded by an invisible force field, which made it impossible to enter. But Lily knew that the key was the answer. With trembling hands, she inserted the key into the lock on the castle gate, and with a loud creak, the gates slowly opened. They had made it inside the castle. But what secrets and treasures lay within its walls? Lily and her family entered the castle cautiously, unsure of what they would find inside. The castle was dark and musty, with cobwebs stretching across the walls and the floors covered in dust. But as their eyes adjusted to the dim light, they saw that there was treasure everywhere. Golden coins, jewels, and ancient artifacts littered the room, shining in the soft light of the sun that filtered through the castle's broken windows. They were overwhelmed by the sight of it all, and for a moment they stood frozen in amazement. But their wonder was short-lived, for suddenly they heard a low growl coming from one of the castle's many hallways. They realized that they were not alone in the castle, and that someone, or something, was watching them. Lily and her family drew their weapons, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The sorcerer laughed wickedly as he saw Lily and her family approaching him. He conjured up a powerful spell that sent a barrage of fireballs hurtling towards them. Lily and her family dodged and weaved their way through the fiery onslaught, their hearts pounding with fear and adrenaline. With each step they took, Lily and her family could feel the sorcerer's power growing stronger. But they knew they couldn't give up. Lily remembered the stories of the ancient heroes who had defeated powerful sorcerers before. She knew that they had to be clever and use their wits to outsmart the sorcerer. Lily quickly scanned the room, searching for anything that might give them an advantage. Her eyes fell on a statue of an ancient warrior, who was holding a sword and shield. She realized that they could use the statue as a weapon against the sorcerer. With all her might, Lily ran towards the statue and toppled it over, sending it hurtling towards the sorcerer. The statue smashed into the sorcerer's shield, causing him to stumble backwards. Lily and her family took this opportunity to strike, charging towards the sorcerer with their weapons raised high. The battle raged on for what seemed like hours. Lily and her family fought bravely, their determination and courage never faltering. But the sorcerer was a powerful foe, and they were beginning to tire. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, Lily noticed something strange. The sorcerer's power seemed to be weakening. His spells were less potent, and his movements were sluggish. It was as if he was losing his magic. Lily realized that the sorcerer's power was tied to the treasure in the castle. As they had taken more and more of the treasure, the sorcerer had grown weaker. With renewed hope, Lily and her family pressed on, determined to defeat the sorcerer once and for all. Lily and her family continued to fight the sorcerer with renewed vigor. They could see that he was growing weaker and weaker with each passing moment, and they knew that they had to act quickly if they wanted to defeat him. Suddenly, the sorcerer let out a blood-curdling scream and collapsed to the ground. Lily and her family had finally defeated him. They let out a triumphant cheer and collapsed onto the ground, exhausted but exhilarated. As they caught their breath, Lily and her family realized that they had accomplished something truly amazing. They had defeated a powerful sorcerer and saved the treasure of the castle. But they also knew that their adventure was far from over. The treasure was still there, waiting to be collected. They knew that they had to be careful, for there were likely many more traps and dangers waiting for them. But they were also excited to see what other wonders the castle held. With a newfound sense of confidence and determination, Lily and her family picked themselves up and began to explore the castle once again. They knew that there was still so much to discover, and they couldn't wait to see what other adventures lay ahead. As Lily and her family continued their exploration of the castle, they found themselves uncovering treasure after treasure. Each room seemed to hold some new wonder or mystery, and they were in awe of the beauty and richness of the castle. But as they approached the final chamber, Lily and her family felt a sense of foreboding. They knew that this was the moment they had been waiting for, the culmination of their journey. With trembling hands, they pushed open the doors of the final chamber and gasped in amazement. The room was filled with gold and jewels, glittering in the light of the setting sun. But in the center of the room, there was a pedestal with a single object on it. Lily and her family approached the pedestal with trepidation, unsure of what they would find. But as they drew closer, they could see that the object was a small, shimmering crystal. As Lily picked up the crystal, she felt a surge of energy flow through her. She knew that this crystal was more than just a piece of treasure. It was a symbol of their journey, a reminder of their bravery and determination. With tears in her eyes, Lily turned to her family and held up the crystal. "We did it," she said. "We defeated the sorcerer and found the treasure. But more than that, we found something even greater. We found ourselves." Her family nodded in agreement, their faces filled with pride and happiness. Together, they had faced countless challenges and overcome incredible obstacles. But through it all, they had never lost sight of what was truly important. As they left the castle and began their journey home, Lily and her family knew that they would never forget their adventure. They would always remember the lessons they had learned, the friendships they had formed, and the treasures they had discovered. For they knew that the greatest treasure of all was the love and courage that had carried them through.